We're the Sweeney, son, and we haven't had any dinner.
Have you seen me dice bag? The Grognard Files.
Hello, my name is Dirk the Dice, and this is the Grognard Files podcast, where we talk bobbins about tabletop RPGs from back in the day and today. I'm coming live from my den here in the heart of the northwest of England. This is the second part of episode 52, which is all about GangBusters, the 1982 RPG produced by TSR, and this features all the bits that didn't quite fit into the first bit, and there's a lot of it, so I'm not going to keep you here for long. Brace yourself. It's a 2 brew and a packet of hobnobs length. Like I always say, take your time. Do it at your own pace. You can even skip the noise of the pub if you don't like to battle with the jukebox if you move it along about 40 minutes. I have Judge Blythy, our resident rules lawyer, with me in the snug at the Lasser Gallery in Manchester, where we scrutinise some of the features of the game that we think are interesting, whilst Liam Gallagher sings along in the background. The beauty of a magazine format is if you don't like one bit, then you can zub along to another that you might. Another feature of the format is that we can introduce a new segment to brighten things up. And new for season 2 is a brand new feature starring members of the Grog Squad. I've named it Appendix G. Over the coming episodes, I'll be inviting enthusiastic contributors to talk about films, TV, music, comics and literature that has influenced and inspired their gaming over the years. The absolute highlight of this podcast is Vaughan Allen talking to me about Sweeney and the Delta Green campaign that he's running that's been inspired by the programme. It's excellent stuff. Because we're in the realm of genre emulation, Blythy also joins me in the GROGGLEBOX to look at the over-the-top 1987 blockbuster, The Untouchables. Sorry, Ed didn't join us in the shed because he doesn't do gangsters, but don't worry, he'll be back soon. At the end, we grab our coats and make some closing remarks before I return here with a quick hint about what comes up in the next podcast. Until then, ramblers, let's get rambling.
Judge Blythy, rules.
Welcome. Now, and you must forgive us, we've come and knocked 3 times and asked for Luigi, and they've let us in. We've already broken our listeners' prohibition that was enforced on. We're in the pub.
We're back in the pub. It's like we can't keep away. Come on. They shut them for 2 years, more or less.
Yeah.
Give us a break.
Yeah. So you're going to have to tolerate us speaking and all the hubbub and bubble happening in the speakeasy as we speak. We can't speak easy because...
We can't speak easy. We've got to speak quite loudly to drown out Oasis or whatever it is that's playing.
Yeah, Stone Roses or whatever.
Roses.
Yeah, if we get boring, you can tune into that. So, Judge Blythy, we're having a look at GangBusters.
GangBusters, yes.
It's very fitting because, as a games master, do you know what you referred to in here?
A judge.
A judge?
A judge,
Yeah. Finally, you've got your...
Always makes me laugh in role-playing games when they do that. So they take the style of game that it is and call the games master something fitting that, the judge. Yeah, because it's like you might end up in court. So with judges, so call them judge.
Yeah.
Very clever, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
One of the things that happens in GangBusters in the foreword, somebody was related to a G-man. He was actually a G-man, one of the Untouchables. Writes the foreword, and what he does, he looks at the rules of the attributes of characters in GangBusters, and he confirms that the use of muscle, toughness, investigative mind, there's an equivalence for a gangster and for a police officer. So he confirms that both the police officer and a criminal have the same attributes.
Sorry, I was thrown then because the man came in. He looked like he was going to join us. He's gone now. They have the same attributes. They're the same. They're two sides of the same coin. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
they're one and the same. It's just chosen different paths. Different paths in life.
Yeah.
The policeman could have so easily become criminal, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Well, it figures, doesn't it? I suppose.
And I suppose it confirms that the attributes that make up characters in GangBusters are the correct ones. He's confirming that in his experience. The muscle, punch rating.
He's confirming that all those things are true.
All those true. Oh.
Is he? I don't know.
Yeah. And he's an untouchable, so...
Well, I won't argue with him then. He'll arrest me.
So you've got your primary attributes of muscle, agility, observation, driving, and they're all expressed as percentage.
Driving, interesting. That's like a key stat, isn't it? Driving.
Yeah.
It's quite fitting because they've got a good angle on the game there, haven't they? Because driving is going to be part of it. It's going to be part of it. Car chases are part of it. The stats are built around the theme of the game, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're expressed as a percentage. And it covers most things, doesn't it? So you use your agility if you're shooting, your muscle if you're fighting.
Yeah.
So you can cover most grounds.
You can. The fella's hovering again. He's hovering. There's a fella. If you can see it, you can't see it because you're listening to a podcast. He's hovering around with the he's coming to the door, looking in, and then just make your mind up. Make your mind up. Is he coming in?
One of the feds.
Well, I don't know what he is, but he's putting me off me judgingness. He's throwing me off me judgingness. I'm like to judge rules here, pal. Clear off. Oh, come in. Make your mind up, please. Nothing worse. Right.
Is it making you anxious?
Well, I can't stand people hovering near doors. You know, like, you know. The kids do it. Kids do it at home. Stand near the door and have a conversation. Just come in and sit down and have a conversation. I'll go to your room. Don't do that. He's doing that.
Well, I can't see him because
I know you can, but I can't. He's gone away now. I think he's hope he's found a seat somewhere. It's a big enough pub, isn't it?
So anyway,
carry on. Sorry, it's insight into my weird anxieties. Many of them.
Anyway, as I was saying, the characters are made up of attributes, and they're expressed as a percentage, and you have a certain set of skills as well that you can get that are relevant to your class. But it's mainly percentage based.
Yes. It's a quite simple system, really, isn't it? It's just percentage based.
Yeah.
I mean, the stats. I think this isn't going to be the rule I don't like, but I do think the stats linked to the stats being the skills and the percentage thing is a little bit odd in that some of the stats can be quite high. So, for example, agility is used for shooting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when we played it, I think Pookie's character had an agility of 97.
Yeah.
And you think, when you're 97% at shooting, I mean, that's ridiculously high, isn't it? So there is it's a bit odd as well. I suppose as well, they can be ridiculously low, which seems odd.
And that's because you didn't go through the character creation process. I don't know if you recall this, but what you actually do is roll the D100.
That's right. Yeah, no, I remember that. That's kind of what I'm driving at.
Yeah.
I remember that. You roll a D100 for the stat. Now, that just seems such a broad range of numbers that seems a bit stupid, because you could roll a 90 and there you go.
Yeah.
I'm a crack. Right from word go, you're a crack shot with a gun. Or you could roll, what, a 30 or a 20?
If it gets adjusted, though, it's a bit like, remember Top Secret?
Yeah.
So if you got a 30, you'd add 15. So that'd be a 45.
To get 90.
So you get 90, you don't add anything, but you just get straight 90.
What? Wait on. So if you get a 90, you get a 90.
Yeah.
But if you get 30, you get 15.
You get a plus 15.
Oh, plus 15. Oh, I see. So,
yeah, you can see.
Yeah,
it stops you getting really low.
Yeah, it stops you getting a really, really low one.
But it does. They do range though, because obviously
it did when we played it. I don't remember that from when we played it with Simon, but when we played that game the other week, I thought, that's a bit of an odd. It is a bit odd that.
Yeah, for some of them are conspicuously low.
Yes.
And others are really high.
And I suppose it's not too bad having an agility of 90 if that then feeds into skills, as some games would do. but it doesn't feed into skills. It essentially says shooting is agility and agility is shooting. So it's high. If it's high, you're going to be brilliant at everything linked to that skill, and that's slightly problematic, I suppose. I found it a bit problematic.
But I quite like how it's like that old school idea of just using a few attributes to cover lots of things, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the skills are very specific, so they like things like wiretapping or things that you would have to have skills to acquire
or technical knowledge to do.
Yes.
Kind of thing. So I think I had. What did my character have? The analysing handwriting.
Graphology.
Graphology. I had graphology. Yeah. Didn't use it.
Did it come up? No.
It did come up because I think I spent my time shooting people, being shot at, and crashing a car. Didn't get a chance to. I think I think the character's handwriting was a bit shaky, probably after crashing the car and being shot with a Tommy gun, staggering through the streets, bleeding. But no, didn't get a chance to.
But if you had the chance, you would have been able to do it.
Yes, I could have looked at the handwriting because this man's been shot. It's my graphology skill.
Okay, so you know the format.
I do.
We've been doing it for long enough. So we need to pick 3 highlights of the rules that you want to talk about.
Yes.
And one duff thing that you want to talk about. So what are your 3 highlights? Number 1.
I think the first one is wounds and bruises.
Wounds and bruises. You have to repeat
not
it.
Stars and wishes.
Wounds and bruises.
Wounds and bruises. It'd be better that, wouldn't it? Can you tell me what your wounds and bruises are from this game?
I like it. Yeah.
Wounds and bruises. That's wounds and bruises.
Wounds and bruises. And the second one?
Second one is presence.
Yeah.
It's a presence attribute.
Yeah. Which works a little differently than all the others.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So you get that from a D10 rather than a D100. Yeah. So we'll talk about that.
And I suppose as well some of the kind of supplemental. If I can be, some of the setting rules, I think, is probably the best way.
Yeah.
Some of the setting rules.
Yeah, because they're quite detailed at the back, aren't they? So that's good.
And I think quite important, given that you might not necessarily know that much about some of the details of the world. I mean, like
the world of crime.
You think you know about gangsters, but particularly when we were younger, what do you know about gangsters? Really?
Yeah.
What do I know?
Yeah.
Maybe not as much as I think.
Yeah. So it's like a day-to-day, how to make day-to-day crime work.
Yes.
Mechanically.
How organised crime works.
Yeah. It's putting some organisation around organised crime.
So organisation around crime, therefore organised crime.
Yeah. So. And then what's your going to be your duff one?
You won't like this because you don't like it when I talk about guns in role playing, but I am going to say the rules on guns. I know. It has to be. They're no good. They're no good. It's a bit of a major flaw in the game, I think. But
I disagree, so I look forward to disagreeing with you.
Disagree,
right? Okay.
Right.
Well, let's get. let's do the first one then. Wounds and bruises.
Wounds and bruises. I picked this because I think. And I think we thought this at the time. A lot of role-playing games, particularly then, just had hit points. So you've got hit points, and if you get hit, you lose hit points, yeah? And when you get to unarmed combat, the standard procedure in most role-playing games of the day, and even now sometimes, is if you hit with a punch, you just take less damage. So if someone punches you, I don't know, you take a D2 damage, don't you? But if you stab you take a D4, and if you hit you with a sword, you get a D8, whatever. But what GangBusters does, it splits the damage, isn't it, into wounds. So if you get shot or stabbed, you get a wound, don't you? But if you get punched, you get a bruise. And the bruises aren't as severe as the wounds. And you can end up dying, but you can't really die from bruises.
Yeah,
well, you're just going to end up knocked out, aren't you?
The way it works is that all gunfire causes wounds.
Yes.
Hand-to-hand fighting causes bruises, but if you're using weapons, there's a chance that it could cause a wound.
Yes.
Yeah. And your bruises, it comes really from punching, which is a fixed amount based on your an attribute that you roll at the start.
But I like it because I think it lends itself really well to this kind of game, where it is a game where you might end up in a punch-up rather than a gunfight.
Yeah.
It's more... in RuneQuest or Traveller or those other games we were playing at the time, the idea of being in a fist fight, kind of unlikely, wasn't it? In RuneQuest, you're more likely to draw your broadsword and try and kill somebody. But in a game like GangBusters, punch-ups are more prevalent and they're going to happen, aren't they? And it deals with that in a really good way. It would have been very easy for them to say, oh well, being punched does just as less damage than other weapons, but they don't do it like that, and that is very clever actually. Particularly for the time, again, it's not, maybe not now, but back then in 1982 that was quite clever, I think.
I think the wounds management in general is quite good, because you do have the death spiral as well, so if you take so many hits, you start reducing your ability to do things. But I think what it allows them to do as well with the bruises is that the fist fighting and the hand-to-hand fighting is quite sophisticated. You've got a few tactical choices.
But you've got the fighting dirty and fighting clean thing, haven't you? Which again is a really neat rule. You think, if you're a policeman, law-abiding policeman, you're going to fight clean, and a mobster's going to fight dirty. Or you could be a copper who fights dirty. Could be, couldn't you? But
so
it gives you that moral choice in a punch-up.
So you're going to go for the Queensberry rules, where you're
going to be biting people's ears and
biting ears and kidney punches.
No, I think they're great. The unarmed combat thing, great. Not too complicated, but there's enough, because you do sometimes get that in some games, don't you? Where you get unarmed combat rules that just get really complicated.
The actual grapple rules are quite straightforward.
For once, the grapple rules are okay. It is straightforward, but it adds a bit of colour to it, and it makes it different from a gunfight.
I was rather hoping in that sample game we had that we'd end up with some kind of fist fight. But you soon got to the heavy artillery. I think from the first 5 minutes you wanted Thompson machine guns.
We tried to get them and failed miserably all the time.
Which brings us on to the next thing, which is presence.
Presence is it's an interesting rule, because it's like a reaction skill, isn't it? So it's a skill. It's like charisma. You could say it's like charisma, but I think the game puts a bit more emphasis on it than other games, and rightly so. So again, going to back in the day, you used to have the monster reactions in D&D and all that kind of thing, didn't you? But in GangBusters, you roll and then you add your presence, don't you, and that kind of thing.
Well,
you can subtract.
So you subtract the highest from the lowest, and that adjusts the NPC reaction table, and you roll two D10s on the NPC reaction table, and lower is the worst result.
But it makes quite a good job of it, and I think it's interesting how it focuses on that, because it's again a bit like fist fights. It's an important aspect of the game in a game like this, isn't it? Because you are going to spend time talking to people. Unlike other games of that era, which you wouldn't. You would have. Again, a kid who buys D&D, AD&D as it was, advanced D&D, would have spent time fighting monsters. If you buy GangBusters as your second game, you're going to need a bit of a steer, aren't you, in terms of how you deal with NPCs and talking to people, because it's going to crop up more. And they do a good job of that, I think, building some rules around that are not just a simple reaction table, but they build rules around how NPCs are going to interact with you, and how they're going to talk to you, and how they're going to respond to you, and that kind of thing. It is quite a good rule, really, particularly again for this era.
I think it works well, particularly because in the book they give some good advice on how to apply it. As a standard, I've been applying it. So 2 games that I ran, so the one I ran face-to-face a few months ago and the one I did online, I tended to use the NPC reaction table, but you don't have to.
No.
Because in the rules they kind of say, well, if you're dealing with people in certain professions, they've got an obligation to do things. So you may not have to roll on this NPC reaction table, or there's certain circumstances where you as a judge might say, actually, I'm going to predetermine how this guy's going to react.
They're going to react.
So I think the advice for judges in here is good.
Yeah, and it's useful. But the reaction rules are useful because I think, as you've said, some of the scenarios do have that sandboxy quality to them, don't they? Where things happen irrespective of what the players do, which suggests in turn the players could be doing other things in Lakefront City. So you do need some rules for kind of ad hoc reactions, which you might not be prepared for because they decide they're going to go here or going to go there.
Yeah,
and they're going to meet someone that you've not prepared, rolling reaction table.
In play, it can produce some humorous results.
Yes.
I think there's a few extreme results, wasn't there, in the game that we played?
There was, yeah. I think my commanding officer, I wanted Tommy guns, and the commanding officer, I offended him, didn't I?
Yeah.
I offended him by asking.
Well, I think the result was violent and hostile attacks regardless of situation. So, really,
I go to the chief of police, ask for Tommy gun, he attacks me. He says, you mean one of these Tommy guns? He shoots me.
And I think the way we played it out
you
was...
had to augment that real slightly, didn't you? By toning it down.
I toned it down. I think he threw the Bible at you, didn't he? That was how he got... As you was leaving.
Well, yeah, my character was... The character you gave me was a very short man. He was not a fundamentalist Christian, but he was a bit of a God botherer, wasn't he?
Yeah.
The Bible. And I decided to quote the Bible at him to justify getting Tommy guns and offended him. Threw his Bible at him. He threw the Bible back at me. Which he's right to do so.
The other, so we've got some extreme reactions in that game, and the other game I played, it was amusing because the same reaction seemed to come up every time.
All the time.
Which is like, because I asked the question, why am I rolling 2d10s rather than a d20 to get responses? And the Smarty Pants.
Oh yeah, of course. The Smarty Pants
talks
about an average,
bell curve.
Yeah, of
so
course.
it turns out that the bell curve will give you uncertain, hesitant. Oh, hang on, where is it? No. Pleasant, but will take no action to help. May answer questions. So it's like the average person,
which is reasonable. I suppose.
The average person in Lakefront City is indifferent to the world.
It's different to the world. And that's true of the world anyway, isn't it? If you start asking people questions about gangsters, they're going to be uncertain and hesitant,
but pleasant.
But pleasant about it, No, I don't. No gangsters around here. Yeah. Would you like a cup of tea? Would you like a cup of bathtub gin? Oh no, not bathtub gin.
Officer. Yeah. Yeah, presence is a good rule.
Yeah, it's a good rule. And again, I suppose it's saying that in the context of the time. I don't think it's any great shakes by modern standards.
Oh no, but we could say that about everything we talk about on this, can't we?
Yeah, and do.
But I disagree sometimes though.
Do you?
Yeah, because I don't know how anything that's out now would give us fun or as reasonable results as applying that.
Yeah, I suppose.
So I think there's a tendency, isn't there, to look back on these old games and say, well, it's of the time, and but I think it does what it does in the context of the game.
No, I suppose what I mean, he does. I suppose what I mean is, people listening might go, "What? So there's a reaction table in a game, and you think that's a great rule? I mean, blimey, that's hardly any." But I suppose what I'm saying is, there's a bit more to it than just a reaction table, and the game makes more of NPC reactions than other games at the time, I think, would have done, because they weren't as important in other games at the time.
That's definitely...
Because the NPCs were dead within about 30 minutes of meeting them most of the time. They were goblins and they're all dead. It doesn't matter.
I agree with you, but I would happily port this into another game I was playing now of this kind of genre, it's kind of pulpy.
And sometimes I suppose it's sometimes as well, like you say, you wonder why you're rolling a reaction table. Sometimes rolling on a random reaction table injects something into the game that wasn't there before.
Exactly,
better spontaneity. Yeah. So there is that.
And it's influenced by the characters' presence. So
I suppose that's the thing with the presence. It feels more like. I suppose the difference is if you would roll at the time, if you'd have rolled an 18 in D&D, all you'd have gone, it's great, I can maybe be a paladin. That's about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if you rolled a high presence in GangBusters, you'd be rightly pleased because you'd think, oh, that's going to be that is going to be more useful.
You're going to be the cock of the block. Is that? Did they use that? I don't know. Did they use that expression
in Chicago?
I don't know. They would in Bolton, wouldn't you?
They would. But that I think that's the difference in presence. The way they play the rule out of the game is more important than charisma in other games you may have played.
Definitely. And the third thing you've picked is the supplementary rules that they give at the back on how to be a gangster.
How to be a gangster, and it explains things like stings, doesn't it, and stuff that you might get up to as a gangster, which again is really useful because, again, you kind of think, when I was a kid, did I really know what gangsters did? I don't think I did.
No.
You wear pinstripe suits, shoot people, but that's about it.
What it does as well is it gives you mechanics to actually have a career as a gangster.
Yes.
So it gives you some tables to give you an indication of bootleg sales. So if you were selling moonshine, this is what you could expect to earn depending on the level of your operation. So that's really
and I suppose it gives it a bit of structure in terms of the point of organised crime is to make money.
Yeah.
Which without those rules, you could lose sight of that a little bit. It sounds odd, but particularly when you were younger, you could lose sight of the fact that the point of being a gangster is to make money, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to have a lifestyle over and above what you would normally have if you worked down at the docks or in a factory. That's why gangsters, that's why they are like they are, isn't it? Because you can earn more money doing that than you could doing the things you could gainfully be employed doing.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's what those rules reinforce and remind you of in the game. But the whole point of this is to earn money.
Yeah.
That's what organised criminals were doing.
What I like about it a lot is that not only does it give you, if you're playing a gangster, the idea of how you could run your business, it also gives you ideas of scenarios because it gives you an idea of what kind of crimes are taking place.
Yeah.
You know, this fixing numbers in casinos, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Soon as you hear that, you start thinking, what if
scenario set in a casino and
what some down in the luck patron is recruits his a private eye to find out why he's lost all his money,
or go into a casino owned by gangsters and try and rip them off by rigging the games yourself, counting the cards and that kind of thing. It gives you ideas that without it you might struggle.
Yes,
particularly back in the day, you'd struggle.
I think in the in the game that we ran online, somebody had to know the distinction between bookkeeping and accountancy. Bookmaking and bookkeeping. There was a discussion around that, wasn't there? I think one of the things that somebody's said to us, or Wayne Peters has mentioned, that he never gravitated towards GangBusters because he likes games that have some fantastical elements. But you could use these for we did Dragon Heist, and in Dragon Heist we ran a pub, didn't we? And we were like petty criminals. That's a story of organised crime, but in a fantasy background. Could you have used the stuff that's in there?
I think you could, because I think what was lacking in Dragon Heist was a bit of that. It didn't really have those elements in it. It did have organised crime in it, but it didn't have much about how the organised crime worked and how you could do things as part of a criminal gang. You were given jobs to do. Right? You go and do this, go and intimidate that person. If you choose those, you don't have to choose the criminal factions in Dragon Heist. You can choose other factions, but if you choose the criminal ones, you get given these jobs to do. But it doesn't really talk about organised. It doesn't really talk about what they're up to, as in how they're making money. There's none of that in it, really. So you could have used rules like this. I know what Wayne means. I agree. There is part of me always wants a bit of fantasy or science fiction in a role-playing game. It seems odd that, it's odd, isn't it? Because when it comes to movies and books, I'm not always reading and watching science fiction and fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
But in a role-playing game, I always want a bit, you know. But I don't know why that should be. It'd be perfectly exciting to play a mobster game on a long-term basis.
And I think we've said this before when we've talked about espionage games and this game. I gravitate more towards these style of games for some reason. I find these more fun for some reason. I like fantasy and science fiction, but if somebody said to me, "Oh, you can play a super spy," I'd be on that because that sounds great. I'll do that. One thing it doesn't do, the rules don't do, and I think this was what was missing from Dragon Heist as well, was this sense of you earn all this money. What do you do with it?
That's an eternal problem in role-playing, isn't it?
Yeah.
With money, because if you can spend money on training to make your character better, it feels worthwhile, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But money, as in, for what?
For the sake of it.
Does your character enjoy themselves? Well, not sure. Like say, if you were a gangster in this and you made thousands and thousands of dollars on some kind of sting or protection racket or bootleg gin smuggling operation, unless it gets your character better, makes your character improve, what are you doing with it? Having a great time. I mean, a real person just have a great time, wouldn't they? They'd buy a flash car and live in a big house and go, oh, look, I've got a big house. But what do you do with it?
And I think that's where more modern games or newer games deal with that better than these older ones, because they talk about downtime, don't they? So what your character does when they're not in the adventure.
I think Barbarians of Lemuria has some rules about downtime and spending all your money. So in Barbarians of Lemuria, you spend all your money. During the downtime, you blow all your money in the tavern, having a good time. That's what you have to do as part of the game.
And I think in Conan it's same, you have that carousing.
We do, yes.
And that kind of gives you benefits to kind of really, some stress relief. It's same in Blades in the Dark. You're indulging your vices to
but
relieve your stress.
As a player, you want to get some mechanical. You either want the rules to insist that you do it, so you have to do it as part of the rules, or you want some mechanical benefit from your character using their money to have a good time. Otherwise, you can't replicate luxury in a role-playing game.
No, because it just feels like, as we said before about travel and other games, treasure's hopeless. It's just like play money, isn't it?
It's play money. Strange thing in a role-playing game, you can replicate extreme violence. You can replicate an odd satisfaction in extreme violence, can't you? So many games have we played where somebody has sliced a monster's head off and gone, felt good, they felt great about it, haven't they? But you can't replicate that for getting drunk in the tavern, can you?
No.
Or you've spent the night getting drunk in the tavern and having a wonderful time. Players don't go, yes, fantastic. They go, all right. Anyway, is there a monster to kill? What does that say about role players? Worrying.
So, let's have this out before we finish then, because
don't say it like that.
The dud rule, we have to talk about guns.
We have to talk about guns. Well, we do, because they're not very. The rules are not. I don't know if the gun rules are no good. I think there's a solution. There is a solution that the game doesn't do. And that is, again, a bit of an old school, new school thing.
Okay.
But one of the problems in the game is that guns do fixed damage, right?
Yeah.
I think a revolver does something like 5 damage.
It does,
something like 5 damage.
And on average, you'll have about 15.
You've got 15 hit points. So, and there's no rules for criticals or anything like that. So you can't, effectively, it's impossible to take someone down with a gunshot. Now that in itself is a bit stupid, because you think if you shoot someone, even in the 1920s, if you shot somebody, there's a good chance you're going to, at the very least, incapacitate them. Aren't they? They're not going to just keep coming at you. Oh, I've got 15 hit points, right, I've hit him with 2 bullets, I've still got 5 left, don't come in. That's not quite realistic.
But it's not realistic.
But it's not realistic, but it takes away some of the drama, and I'll give you an example. When we played that game, David's character got machine gunned by Tommy Gun, didn't he?
Yeah.
He's on the cusp of death.
So we should say
right at the edge of death.
We should say that Tommy guns
are lethal.
Rapid
fire weapon
Yeah.
is lethal.
They hit bursts.
Yeah, bursts can. So yeah, you got 20 hit points, and you take
20.
You take a 20,
Yeah.
which a Tommy gun can do. You're going down. That's what happened to David's character,
Yeah.
wasn't it? So, and he was there. It was a great scene. I thought it was a fantastic scene. The rain was pouring down. He crawled into a doorway.
And we should say he used his luck.
He used his luck to pull through. Just he was on one point of life, wasn't he? He crawled into a doorway. He got his revolver out, and the mobster with the machine gun was marching towards him, ready to finish him off.
Yeah.
But he couldn't kill the mobster. It was impossible.
Yeah.
He'd have to hit him four times in 4 rounds.
Yeah.
And that just seemed crap. Because what you wanted was that lucky shot that took this arrogant mobster down before he machine gunned him to death. But it seemed kind of disproportionate. And that, I do think it's a big flaw. It's a flaw that would be solved by having mooks.
Yeah.
If you had mooks that only had 5 hit points and one shot could take a mook out, but a main villain or a player character was a bit tougher, I could accept that. It's not realistic. So player characters can't be killed by one gunshot because they're players. They're going to get hit in the shoulder, the main character. But because all the characters, even the mooks, have a lot of hit points, it does seem a big problem. But you could fix it by just saying, if that guy with the Tommy gun approaching David's character had been a mook with 5 hit points, he could have shot him. And that would have been exciting and dramatic.
Yeah,
but
as it was, we had him run over by a Fiat van, a GM Fiat van.
Yeah, so I have to say, vehicles are more deadly than guns.
They are.
In a car crash. My character nearly died in a car crash.
Yeah,
but he took about 3 bullets. He was fine. Bullets weren't a problem. Car crash.
I think it is a way of because it isn't realistic. It is like
I accept that. But
action and the luck rule, the fact that you can get shot at and actually avoid injury. It happened to David twice until he get blasted with his Tommy gun. But he, it is there for that kind of mega death luck saving run. But you're right. If it was proportionally better for player characters, it'd be more fun, wouldn't it? And,
I think so.
To mention the vehicle rules, because you're right. I mean, you decided to knock over a pedestrian, didn't you?
I didn't knock over a pedestrian. He was a gangster with a gun. I ran over a gangster with a gun, not a pedestrian. I didn't go, oh, here I am, a God-fearing, Bible-bashing policeman at the wheel of a car run over a pedestrian. He was a vicious mobster. He pulled a gun on
an alleged mobster.
He was a mobster. He had a stripy suit on, a fedora, and a gun. I mean, I know everyone was wearing that in the 1920s. That's not the point.
So he went at him, hell for leather, and he took a bit of damage, but then he crashed into a wall.
No airbags in those days.
Yeah. And the way that works is when you crash, you roll on the table, and it determines how much damage everybody takes in the car. And as you say, it can be lethal. It's kind of fatal in the car. Yeah. I actually think the vehicle rules are quite good because they're quite simple, but they do the job.
It is a simple game. It's quite a simple game. It's
not
a difficult game. It works quite well.
I think overall, mechanically and rules, it does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
And I can see why it feels such an enduring game, and it's quite fun to play.
Fun to play and possibly pitched right in terms of its gangsters, but it's comic book gangsters. It's not trying to replicate real world crime, which could become problematic. I think maybe try to do that because it's quite unpleasant, isn't it?
Yeah,
but it doesn't. It's not that kind of world of crime. It's more.
It's the world of films, and that's what we're going to do next, isn't it?
Yeah,
we'll come back. Probably not in the pub then, will we? We'll be watching the film in GROGGLEBOX. Probably
not in the pub. I mean, that fella's gone away anyway. Thank God.
I felt his presence.
Yeah, high presence score.
Yeah,
and our reaction was, mine was react violently. Get out. get out to the snug, tower snug.
Chuck a Bible at
Go
him.
away.
See you later, Blythy.
See ya.
Appendix G.
And welcome to Appendix G, a brand new segment to the Grognard Files, because gaming doesn't exist in a vacuum. We're influenced and inspired by films, TV, comics, books, and music. And over the next few episodes, we'll be collecting a handy collectible guide on how to use this inspiration in your gaming. And I'm delighted to have Vaughan Allen with me. Hello, Vaughan, member of the GROGSQUAD.
Hello, Dirk. Good afternoon.
It's good to have you. And you're going to introduce a TV series to us, aren't you? So tell us a bit about that. So what is your inspiration, your gaming inspiration?
I think not so much a TV series, but possibly the TV series. So I'm here to talk about The Sweeney, which for those of you who are maybe of an American persuasion and only saw a very bad film in 2012, is probably ranks among the top 5 or so classic TV series produced by British television, really from 1960 through to about 2000. It was first broadcast in 75, lasted till 78. Pretty short time span, but in that time they produced 50-odd episodes, 52 episodes, I think it was, which actually for British TV, again, that's a lot of episodes. That's almost on an American type of level. And 2 feature films in that as well. The first feature film is utter rubbish. The second film is brilliant. The Sweeney is based on the adventures of 2 detectives who are part of the Flying Squad, and in Cockney rhyming slang, allegedly, Flying Squad translates to Sweeney Todd, which shortens to Sweeney. I'm not convinced that was actually the case until the TV producers came up with it, but we'll let that fly. It was a very, very different way of making TV at that time. Britain had had a very long-running TV series called Dixon of Dock Green, which I think had started in the late 50s, and was about a copper on the beat. And George Dixon was the height of respectability, and he'd talk to kids going off the rails dads and just say, little Johnny, he needs to be brought back. And by certainly the mid-70s, it is interesting, Dixon of Dock Green actually went on until 76. It really didn't represent what was happening in culture, in popular culture, in policing at all. The Sweeney was made on film. It was made in a really exciting semi-cinema verite type way. Car chases were a big part of it. Fist fights were a big part of it. So you could say it's the British equivalent of Starsky and Hutch, but in Starsky and Hutch, the fist fights were still very superhero-ish. There was never any blood. In the Sweeney, you saw people hit with baseball bats, hit with iron clubs. It was very violent, and particularly for the time. It caused something of a scandal at the time. It was very open to sex. It was very open to a lot of swearing, and in the films, they really went for the swearing. So much so that it got what was then an X certificate, and it's still, if you watch it on Amazon Prime, and you can watch the whole TV series on Amazon Prime, it still has a certificate on it, tucked away in the corner. But it represented something of a real change in what was happening in TV's treatment of the police, TV's treatment of crime, and I think also TV's treatment of popular culture, because it was both very influenced by popular culture and reading some of the accounts of the main people involved very much influenced both future popular culture, but also the way the police viewed themselves.
I seem to remember it being promoted in Lukin, which was aimed at children, because there wasn't that sense of watershed at that time, was it? In the 70s, of these programs were accessible to us as kids. They
were, and I can certainly remember watching it. I mean, it was on commercial television, and certainly for part of my family, we were very much, mostly you just watch the BBC, you don't watch commercial television. But when it was first broadcast, I'm pretty sure it was broadcast in sort of the 9 o'clock slot. And it was broadcast as, really, that was, where you put your main drama and the stuff that really brought in the advertising income. And the Sweeney was huge. So for Thames Television and for Euston Films, that was the actual production company, it brought them in a huge amount of money. Apparently, again, reading on it, no residuals. It was non-unionized labor, no residuals for the actors. So that virtually everybody that was involved with it earned about 7K for a series, and that was it. Your flat rate sort of thing. It made a lot of money for the production company, I think. But it was available enough that certainly in the playground at 11 and 12, you would be talking about what you'd seen in the Sweeney. And it would be very much for a young teenage kid. The chance of there being bare breasts in an episode of the Sweeney was quite high. So it would be something that you would probably try and make sure that you could be watching maybe without your parents.
Yeah, certainly when they did a raid, they always managed to find a woman in a bath, didn't they? It seemed to be the rigor.
It was astonishing how they did that. I just don't know how they had that intelligence every single time. Or there was always a couple in bed. I think it's in the first film. Regan, one of the two main characters, Regan and Carter, runs through on a raid, and it's a sort of harem thing, and there is a guy in bed with about 3 women. And it's like, this is only lasting for 10 seconds, but it's obviously because there hasn't been any bare flesh for about 20 minutes in the film, and we need to do something. There's no other plot point to it whatsoever.
So central to it is this relationship between Regan and Carter, isn't it? How would you describe that?
Interesting in the term, in the way that George Carter is the sergeant, Jack Regan is the inspector. One is superior to the other, and one is much older than the other. Though Thor and Dennis Waterman, who played, are only about 5-6 years apart. Thor did not look like 32 or 33 or whatever age he was when he played it. He looked mid-late 40s, and certainly by the end of the series, and the last few episodes are actually quite sad. And in the very last episode, which is a brilliant watch, he's sort of stitched up for corruption and then walks out of the flying squad at the end of it. He's had enough. But you actually see the toll of both his personal, John Thor was a known alcoholic, his personal alcoholic use, the partying they did during the sets, and just getting exhausted from this ridiculous filming schedule. So they look like they're at least a decade apart. And that does come across in terms of the relationship very much, which I don't think you do have in Starsky and Hutch. You don't have it in The Professionals, which I think is probably the nearest that we had as a successor to the Sweeney, and lasted from sort of 78 through to 82, 83. I think that relationship is interesting when it comes to some of the attempts at some of the emotional stuff. So halfway through the second series, George Carter's wife gets killed in a hit and run. And there is one of those classic, and I don't think you'd see this on American TV, ways of dealing with it by English manhood, where Regan turns up with a couple of bottles of whiskey and basically says, I will chase you to the bottom of the label. And that's it. That's all that's said. And then you get a sort of, a montage of about 5 minutes of them drinking and talking about life and those sort of things. I can't imagine Starsky and Hutch doing it, though I could imagine it happening on something like the Rockford Files, which I think is probably the nearest American series to it. Something that was brutal and also had the city around it as a character, because in the Sweeney, London was very much a character and very, very heavily involved in it. But that relationship is, they are in classic TV copland, they don't get on with their superior, albeit it's an interesting relationship and there are certain circumstances where they do get on with them. I think one of the things that factored into that is by the time it was started being broadcast in 75, there was a pilot in 74. Many of the London flying squad had been put in prison or were about to be put in prison for corruption. And it'd been an ongoing story since 71, 72. So it was an interesting choice to focus on that group. So this idea of being slightly outside the law, slightly, massively disreputable, was well in the public consciousness. So this fact of they didn't follow the rules, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, was really, really core to them. And that's something that is in it. I can't think of a cop series, possibly with the exception of Juliet Bravo, where that isn't part of the storyline. And I think, for Britain, that was probably the first to do that, and certainly to do it on that scale where it became such an obvious trope.
And just to give a sense of what were the crimes that they were fighting, and are there any reoccurring baddies to the series?
There aren't a lot of reoccurring baddies, which I think is partially. I mean, it was made very much in a period where we were post-Craze, post-Richardson's, so that mix of organised crime and showbiz had faded away a little bit. You'd started to get some of the gangs from South London who were a little bit more reticent and certainly weren't out drinking with the Daily Express crime reporters on a Friday night and spilling their guts to them. The Flying Squad was, I think, picked because they were set up a semi-independent team within the Metropolitan Police that could rush about in fast cars in the 20s and 30s. So very good for Call of Cthulhu, I'd say, even in the 20s and 30s. But certainly by the 60s, they were really focusing on armed robberies. So they were focusing on what were called blags, and you never hear them called anything other than blags, as far as I'm aware, that are of money delivery vehicles, of banks, of transports, wage runs. I mean, quite why in the 70s everything was being done with cash running up and down the motorways in little minivans. I don't know. So there was a wonderful run of extras where you can see almost the same extras are being re-employed to be the security guard that gets whacked over the head with a baseball bat from one episode to the other. So the Flying Squad historically were tasked with doing this job, which actually meant that they may leave the Met Police boundaries, go up the M1 a bit, go out on the M4 to try and deal with some of these robberies. And the big Heathrow robberies, there were about 3 in the first few years of the 70s. They were the team that actually dealt with it and solved. And it meant that, as a matter of course, they had firearms because the people that they were facing had firearms. And of course, that's really exciting compared to, your Bobby on the beat who had a truncheon at the time and still does, albeit a metal truncheon rather than a wooden one these days. It is bank robberies. It is wage heists. It's a number of other things. Quite often there's recurring stuff about somebody coming out of prison planning their next job. I think one of the recurring tropes that's really, really interesting is very, very swiftly, in probably 50% of the episodes, Regan and Carter know exactly who it is that's done that job. They've got enough information from their past or from their informants, and there's a lot of work with informants. They drink in the same pubs as the criminals. Again and again, they are in the same pubs as the criminals. The criminals send over a bottle of whiskey. Mr. Regan, how are you? I'd like to see you. You didn't get me that last time, did you? There is this relationship, which, reading all the memoirs, is absolutely accurate. Everybody was in the same pubs. Everybody was talking to each other. And then formulaically, the Sweeney employed some of the best script writers in British television. So you have people like Troy Kennedy Martin, who went on to work on Age of Darkness and numerous others. And so they used the formula to set up other really interesting stories. So Abduction, which ends the first series, is Regan's daughter by his estranged wife who's kidnapped. And you get that classic panic about whether she can be rescued, all of those sort of things. There's an earlier episode where one of the drivers for the Sweeney is blackmailed because of his past into working for a robbery gang. The very last episode, the one I was talking about earlier, where Regan is done for corruption, is a brilliant piece of script writing and a brilliant piece of theatre, and bears resemblance to the later Inspector Morse episode, where he's set up by a brilliant criminal to take the fall for something, only without the music and whatever. But so very quickly you found people working within that framework where there was, maybe it was a robbery was part of it, but that wasn't really the story that you were being told.
I have to mention this before we move on to gaming. Morecambe and Wise made an appearance in there, didn't they, with Little Ern's wig? Yeah,
more entertainingly, Little Ern is sitting in bed reading Carry On Emmanuel or something along those lines. I went back after you mentioned it on the Discord the other day, and I went back and watched it. It's a terrible episode, but they tried to do quite comedic things, and it didn't work. I believe the story is that they had appeared on, Thor and Waterman had appeared on the Christmas show for Morecambe and Wise, and as they were looking for scripts for the fourth series, they called the favour back in. And it doesn't work.
You have a real love for the Sweeney. So how did this appear in your games?
When I came out of, thanks to you guys, when I came out of Deep Freeze, we started playing through a lot of Cthulhu books. We did Berlin, we did Harlem. Really interested in the way that those books put together the atmosphere, the storylines, the underlying characters, and then started producing scenarios. So when it got to the beginning of this year, I wanted to start looking at something that we could do as a gaming group that I would be interested in is playing with the Cthulhu stroke Delta Green mechanics, and that would inspire me and interest me. So it sort of brought a lot of things together. And I thought, well, given the sort of the P Division thing in Liminal, given the sort of peculiar crimes unit, what if you had a group like the Sweeney who were dealing with cultish type organizations in London in the early 70s? It would allow you to play in Get Carter and Performance, allow you to play in the real stuff that was happening there. 1974, Harold Wilson takes over. There were real threats of a coup from the Monday Club and from Lord Lucan and various others that were going on. By 75, you have Throbbing Gristle moving, so 76, you have Throbbing Gristle moving to London, you have the start of the Sex Pistols, you have Malcolm McLaren doing what he's doing. So you have this mass of pop culture, you have this mass of criminals running around, and you have this wonderful, wonderful city that is still looking like it was affected by the war, is still bombed in the war. And I think that's one of the things that comes through. In the Sweeney, London is a character in it. They film a lot in the Docklands. A lot of it's filmed in Hammersmith, Shepherd's Bush, which is where the real Flying Squad was based. And so I thought all of this stuff that you could pile in the 70s, this sense of everything breaking apart. There were constant strikes. There was a civil war in Northern Ireland, which came into Britain. In the scenarios we did in the 1971, we had the Angry Brigade in it, who were heavily involved. The squatting scene in Notting Hill and Hackney. So there's this huge pot of stuff that you could pull in, which just seemed perfect to be able to play without being necessarily historically totally accurate. Because we have a character. One of our characters is Jim Regan, who is the less successful brother of Jack, and so it's inspired a sort of 1970s campaign that is definitely ongoing.
What does a normal session look like? So what does it start with? What inspires it? And how do you use the formula and beats in the Sweeney to kind of direct that? Or do you? What format does it take?
Yeah, I definitely do. So what I've done is I've mapped out some story arcs that take the entirety of the 70s and actually go up to the accession of your friend Mrs. Thatcher. So within each year, I've picked out what I want to be some of the skeleton of it. And what I then try and think of within that is, okay, how can we hook in some real events? Started with an edited version of Curse of the Bone, which the classic White Dwarf scenario, which led us to ghouls, which led us to ghoul emperors trying to take over London and summon up Niogtha. And I thought, well, how can you get what's needed and dig a hole? And then I was just looking through the event in 1971 and found in June 1971 the first time capsule at Blue Peter was buried. And it was like, wouldn't it be great to just end with a set piece of they've got to try and get this time capsule back while it's on live television and replace what was going in it, which was magical stuff, with actually the original stuff. They didn't bother doing that. They just stuck a few hand grenades in and blew up Peter Purvis in classic Call of Cthulhu style. But there's an excellent episode set in a pub, which is a bit of a locked room mystery. Pub opposite a bank, which is being robbed, with an old flame. He ends up in bed with her. They seem, looking at it, to work their way through at least a bottle of whiskey, which is quite astonishing considering then he goes on a rooftop chase with a gun in his hand. That sort of set piece, it was like, well, how is this structured? How does this work? So I then pulled that out for the middle bit of what I wanted to do. I know that I want to have this bit of a storyline, which is there are some papers that need to be picked up. You're on the trail of the gang that's trying to track them. So rather than just trailing the gang, why don't we have some information and intelligence that comes through that says they will be at this bank, you're overlooking it from the pub. So I've effectively just used the entire storyline as a way of picking up what's going on. It was made for commercial television, the Sweeney. So there's a very clear structure of first act. Opens with a teaser, going into the very famous theme tune, always upbeat, always to get your heart racing. Then you go into the first act where you sort of start with the investigation, gradually work your way up. Second act is all denouement and climax. Third act is usually the resolution, and then a wind down to the minor key version of the titles at the end, where you've got to have a sort of slightly sarcastic, slightly cynical comment leading into it. You can't have a fight just before the end. The first start, I took the DG idea of you have a starting crew, but you need that crew to come from very different backgrounds. What we did then have is the opportunity to say, okay, that comes Jim Regan comes from the police. Well, we've got a hippie occultist. Well, maybe he had previously been nicked by Jim, so there's a relationship there. So how do we keep that relationship going? Very quickly, we found within the first sort of episode, for want of a better term, is that some of the NPCs were actually being, as you'll know from the thousands of games you run, being relied on more than you possibly have written them to be relied on. And they become, so, I had a witch who was a very much a small character in the first one, who are just, because I have a bad sense of humor, called Marianne Faithless. And she's become quite a major character who is one of their sort of chief advisors that keeps coming back. So the relationship between them is very much on we are driven to be together because literally we can have no help. Everything that is written in it, much as with the Sweeney, is any official police help is corrupt and you don't know who you can trust. You can't actually go out and threaten people. The current episode they're working on is based in Soho. It's based on it at the height of, as one of the players put it, the muckiest part. He needed a bath after one of the episodes. The muckiest point in Soho, where everything is run by the Maltese and post-Maltese gangs. They have the entire obscene publication squad in their pocket. You can't go in and threaten and use a police badge because they already make their payments to the police to a different department. So who is it you're going to trust? And I think that means that the team came together very, very quickly. I think the other thing that brought the team together was, though two of the players are late 20s, they were aware of the Sweeney stuff and are aware of some of the 70s stuff. The other two are sort of in their late 40s, early 50s, so had lived through it, or in fact were cultural academics specialising in it. But you had enough of that knowledge that it became quite interesting to explore that world and explore how that stuff would come on, but also to be a bit playful about it and to pick up that stuff. So some of the funnest bits are, Curse of the Bone. They ended up going down the tunnels and were working all night. So we used the DG thing of having will points and exhaustion, which I like. So I was about to hit them all with exhaustion. And one of the 20 somethings went, well, we need some coffee. I'll go and find a cafetiere upstairs in the kitchen. And it's like all the 50-year-olds looked at each other and went, no, you won't. Mellow birds, you might be able to get upstairs, but that's probably all you're going to, and those some conversations that come, which provide a light-hearted bit in what is very much a really quite dark, the world is collapsing. I mean, the 70s was like that. But when you start digging into the corruption and various other things that were going on as well, it's a pretty dark place.
For people who don't know the Sweeney, or don't know this era, where would you point them towards? Where should they start?
Start at the beginning of the first series, or the second movie. The second movie is really good. It is quite over the top, and they're very well into their roles. I think the third and fourth series have too much comedy, at least for me. The first series hits the ground running. Virtually every British character actor of the 70s and 80s is in it somewhere. The first 3 or 4 episodes, you're going to know whether you like it or not. Try and swing with the absolutely outrageous sexism. I have a feeling that was exactly how the Flying Squad acted, and I'm pretty sure that was probably exactly how the team acted. Interestingly, as you get on towards the end of the first series and the second series, though the sexism continues, there are some very strong women that come into it as well, and certainly give as good as they got.
What you're saying is avoid Ray Winston. Is that correct?
I think that Ray Winston is in a lot of brilliant things. Indeed, I think as a youngster he was in an episode of the Sweeney. I think he was. But that film the film has Jeremy Clarkson in it for a start. So it's one of those, that you sort of go, please don't. This is just the wrong thing to do. But it's better than the Sylvester Stallone version of Get Carter.
Thanks, Vaughan. GROGGLEBOX. Welcome to the Zoom of role-playing rambling. I've got Blythy with me. Hi, Blythy.
Hello, Dirk.
Our recording once again interrupted by a storm. Storm Eunice, a bigger one than the other two that disrupted our
Even bigger. It's almost like, I don't know, the god Thor, the god of thunder, is against our podcast in some way.
Orlanth is blowing a gust up our gusset every time we come to sit together. But
yeah, it's not global warming, it's us.
We come together to talk about The Untouchables, Brian De Palma's film from 1987. It was a big deal back in 1987. It was a big blockbuster film at the time.
I think I watched it at the cinema with my wife-to-be, I think. Yeah, went to the cinema a lot then.
I have a bit of a history with it in that I was very sniffy about the film when it was released, and there's a reason for that. I was at college, and the film club that I managed to get on the committee, because if you're not a messianic megalomaniac, you've got to get into the source of power straight away, haven't you? That's the idea. And my plan on having a series of arty films was not back. And the committee insisted on having these Hollywood blockbusters, a season of these Hollywood blockbusters, of which The Untouchables was one of them, because they wanted to appeal to a generic crowd and in the previous season, they put on I Know Corrida, In the Realm of the Senses. And it was very popular. They had to show it three times.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that? How strange it should be so popular.
If people don't know it, it's a story of a passionate affair which ends with somebody dying in orgasm, and the woman wears the fella's todger around her neck for a few days. At the end of it, so
you never thought you'd hear that on a RPG podcast. There you go. That must be a first.
Anyway, it caused a real stink, and the board of the college kind of came down heavily on it, and so they were taking no risks with this season. So
you were forced into. Sounds like Stalinist Russia. You were forced into safe Hollywood films, were you?
Exactly.
The establishment, an educational establishment, doing that.
Yeah,
there you go.
There you
surprising.
go.
They're into like Three Thoughts and all that kind of thing. Apparently not. They're into Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner and that rubbish film Nadine. I don't know if you remember it, with Kim Basinger vehicle where she was drunk. Oh, it was terrible.
I don't remember that one. No.
I wanted a John Goddard season, and it all planned out. But it was not bad.
What you got, Kevin? You got Kevin Costner, Kim Basinger, Passenger, or whatever.
So I was always sniffy about it, and didn't like it because, we'll go into this a bit more, but it is an over the top Hollywood production.
I think it's quite interesting though that you say you're quite sniffy about it, because I think I was too until I rewatched it for this. I'd got it in my head that it was rubbish. I got it in my head. This thing with Kevin Costner, isn't it? You see, Kevin Costner he got a bit of a bad reputation now, hasn't he, for all the films he was in are rubbish. The Robin Hood film, and Waterworld and all that kind of thing. Everyone's sort of got it. I don't know, but maybe not everyone, but I agree with you. I got it in my head that, well, if you're going to watch a gangster film, don't watch The Untouchables, because The Untouchables is not really a gangster film. It's just kind of, cops and robbers. And
the studio went big with it. So they've got a lot of big name stars, De Palma, and they've got a great cast, and got David Mamet, and the screenplay is fantastically quotable, isn't it? There's some great lines in it, and of course De Niro's in it, and De Niro, his performance kind of exemplifies how bombastic and over the top, and it just reminds you that it's not a naturalistic film whatsoever, is it? It's just ridiculously over the top, his performance.
It doesn't really, in some ways, it's unfair to compare it to things like The Godfather or Goodfellas, isn't it? Because it's not, although it's about gangsters, it's not really in that bracket, is it? In the same way that I was sniffy about it, because I think, it's just cops and robbers. Well, it is cops and robbers. But actually, when you watch it again, you think, do you know what? It's no bad thing, is it?
Yeah.
What it sets out to do, it does very, very well, I think. I think the difficulty is when you watch it, if you're expecting The Godfather or Goodfellas or something like that, or Scarface, if you're expecting that kind of film, that's not what you're going to get. But what it does very, very well, I think. It's very watchable, actually. It's quite entertaining, really.
And you're right, watching it now, I've got a different appreciation of it. And part of that is because if you want to play GangBusters, watch this film, because it'll give you everything you need to play GangBusters. I played again last night as part of a weekend with the good friends, with a new group of people. And I would have to say that my experience is enhanced by having watched The Untouchables a couple of nights before, because it kind of turns up all the cliches, and that's what gaming does, isn't it? It relies on those stereotypes and that kind of collective knowledge that we have about these types of films and these types of environments.
And I think, as well, as we discussed in the previous podcast, the difficulty with a lot of gangster films in terms of crossing them over to RPGs is they're not really transferable into an RPG format, or if they are, it's very difficult because you've got all that thing that you discussed about people climbing to the top, and the paranoia of being whacked by someone who wants to take your position, and those things are difficult to translate into a role-playing game. But the Untouchables is the opposite. When you watch it, you think, this is like a role-playing game. This is exactly the kind of thing a role-playing game would be. It gathers together some player characters and they set off to beat the bad guys. And that's role-playing. Simple, straightforward, cops and robbers role-playing, yeah.
And when I was watching it, I came up with this idea that I'm going to rename Brian De Palma as Brian DM Palmer, because the way that he constructs his scenes, very much like a Games Master does. We're going to go through some of these set pieces that he puts together, but he sets up the stakes. He makes it very clear what is happening in a scene and what outcome the characters are trying to get out of it, and then puts obstacles in the way to prevent them doing it. And that's where the drama comes from. And that's precisely how a scenario would work, isn't it? These kind of scenes in a scenario.
As well, it has an unambiguous quality to it, and that these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. And there is no point in that film. There is no point in that film. Although there are some bent cops. That's an issue which maybe we'll talk about. The idea of bent cops and dodgy policemen is part of it. But the central characters, there's no point in the film where you think any of those central characters are going to betray any of the other characters. They are good guys, and it's as simple as that. There's no point at which you think, because I'm not sure about him, but that's never on the table, is it? They're essentially the four central characters are the Untouchables. They are good guys, simple as that.
And even when there's like a kind of suggestion when they go to recruit Andy Garcia and he's from the neighborhood, it's quickly eliminated, isn't it? And put out.
That's what's interesting about a scene. You got the Andy Garcia character who's Italian American, and of course you think, oh well, he's a suspect, isn't he? But he's not. He's not, is he? Once he's recruited into the ranks of Kevin Costner's men, there's no point where you think, I'm not sure about the Andy Garcia character. He's a good guy. That's it. Simple. Play a character. There's no player versus player in this game.
No. And even De Niro, watching it now, 30 odd years later, realise that it's actually probably more subtle than I gave it credit for, in that it references Money's performance in Scarface from the 20s. It has got kind of references to the mannerisms in doing that, because I think at this point De Niro was on the turn, wasn't he? After great performances in the 70s and early 80s, he was kind of chasing paychecks, wasn't he, at this point? But I think there is more subtlety to it. I think give it credit for. It is better than you remember as a performance. But you're right. I suppose he's. Does he ham it? Can you say Robert De Niro hams it up a bit? Is that a thing you can say about Robert De Niro? Yeah, I think
if he does that, if he hams a part, if he ever hams a part up in a film, this is the part he hams up a bit, I think.
Yeah. No, I think
but he kind of almost like he's enjoying himself.
Yeah. He does a lot of that kind of.
Maybe he's had all these intense parts in The Day Hunter and all that. But maybe in The Untouchables, he's kind of enjoying himself, almost being a panto villain, Al Capone. There's a sense there, I think, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there is a sense that maybe De Niro's going, oh yeah, what do I have to be, Al Capone? Oh great, I'll just be Al Capone then.
He does a lot of that kind of gurning, wobbling his head from that gurney frown he does, wobbling his head from side to side, doesn't it? Yeah. Bob Hoskins was lined up for that part. I have to tell this because Hoskins used to tell this story every time he was on the TV in the 80s, but he was lined up for that part, and he found out in the press that he hadn't got it and just thought, right, okay, whatever, I'll stand aside for De Niro. If you're going to stand aside for anyone, I'll stand aside for him. And then weeks later, he got a check in the post for $20,000. And he rung up Brian De Palma and said, what's this for? He said, oh, well, thanks for being on standby for me. And he said, that's great. Have you got any other films you don't want me to be in? So let's have a look at the film. Rather than going through it as a synopsis, what I thought I'd do is, this is a film of set pieces. I thought I'd pick out some set moments so that we can talk about them and talk about Brian DM Palmer sets them up for gaming. So the initial stage is bringing the gang together, isn't it? So it's almost like the Magnificent Seven drawing together the group of player characters. And they are distinctly player characters, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely, because you've got the accountant, haven't you? Oh, he's not an accountant; he's an FBI agent, but he's right from the word go. And it's obviously quite funny, isn't it? That from the word go, he is pointing out his tax affairs aren't in order. But he's a player character, isn't he? High intelligence, low strength, low constitution. He's the kind of brains of the operation, isn't he?
And every accountant that you meet will tell you, Al Capone was brought down by an accountant eventually. So, details do matter. Details do matter.
And maybe when they do that, you should point out what happens to this accountant.
Yeah.
In a lift in the film. That'd
Yes.
shut them up, wouldn't it?
I think this early bit of the film does set up the context, the brutal context in which they're trying to survive. It's very much Lakefront City, this.
You've got Connery's character, haven't you, the recruit, who's disenchanted cop, isn't disenchanted beat cop, given up on it all, that really they're all bent. And he's a straight cop, but what's the point? Kind of reluctant old cop, isn't he?
He also acts as a mentor for Elliot Ness and kind of saying, if you're going to go for this, you got to go for it because the risks and the stakes are high.
Exactly. Elliot Ness is the lawful good paladin, isn't he? And Sean Connery is the chaotic good fighter or ranger, isn't he? So don't stick to the rules. Stop sticking to the rules, basically.
The ends justify the means. Of course, we've mentioned Andy Garcia, who's the rookie sharpshooter. And I think the other element that they set up really well that makes it like a role-playing game is that because they can't trust anybody, they're operating outside the usual law enforcement unit, because they try doing an initial raid and they get shocked because they are all corrupt. So they decide to go it alone. They're actually outside of the system, operating as a group. And this is why it's ideal for role playing and for gangster role playing.
Yeah, that's true. They do. They operate as a separate unit, don't they? Which focuses in on those four characters, rather than the police force. It's not really about the police force, is it? It's about, and it's not, I suppose in that sense, it's not police procedural, is it? Because it's not about the police force. It's about four people who are sort of mavericks, really, who separate themselves out from that in order to do what they want to do. But by doing that, you do focus on those four characters. The rest of the police force kind of sink into the background a little bit, don't they? And although there are, you said there are dodgy cops, but they're not central to it.
And so it sets it up then for the adventures that they're going to go on. And this is audacious, I think. For one of them, it goes out of the city and puts them on the US-Canadian border. It is quite audacious when you think that this is an urban noir fantasy. And De Palma says, well, actually, let's take them out of that and do a High Chaparral scene.
It turns it into a Western for about 25 minutes. It turns into a Western, doesn't it, really? When they're on horseback and,
Which again underscores that unambiguous idea of a Ford Western where the good guys are good and the bad guys are bad. Yeah. You've even got the cavalry, haven't you, charging in at the end.
The Mounties, It's kind of like a set piece you would have in a role-playing game, isn't it? You can imagine that whole scene being done with Savage Worlds, can't you?
Capone's men are meeting on the border to collect liquor and inspect it before picking it up. However, Elliot Ness have prepared an ambush on horseback with Tommy guns. I mean, come on. What's not to like?
Not to like about that, yeah. There's a great shootout in there between the good guys and the mob. You see, the mobsters are these they're slightly grotesque looking characters, aren't they? In gaudy clothes. Isn't one of them wearing like a fur coat or something? There's something about the way they dress. They're very stylized, aren't they? I mean, you wouldn't, in all honesty, you don't really need a police force in this film, because all you'd have to do is walk down the street and find someone who looks evil, has an evil looking face, and is wearing a gaudy suit and hat, and go, they're a gangster. They're wearing spats or a white suit or something, or a purple suit, or like the guy, I think there is a guy wearing a fur coat, isn't there, on the bridge? Yeah. A combination of kind of sinister, slightly camp, and grotesque all at the same time, don't they?
Yeah.
They don't look like normal people.
Armani suits as well. Armani did the costume for it. I think that was one of the reasons why I was a bit sniffy about it, because it felt like the ultimate product placement initially. But as this scene plays out, it is a classic role-playing ambush.
And it also highlights that thing of the difference in approach, because there's the great scene where Connery, there's the dead guy, the guy's been shot, the gangster has been shot, and Connery pulls him from the ground, doesn't he? And through the window shoots him in the head, as if pretending that he's still alive, in order to terrify the gangster that they've caught into talking. Which, of course, the gangster then thinks, "Oh my God, he's just shot someone in the head." And he's not. That's a really, really good scene that demonstrates that the Connery's approach to it. He's not murdering someone that's already dead, but he pretends that he's murdering somebody in order to frighten the other guy into talking. Again, just highlights the alignment of the characters.
Yeah. And also there's some typical player character techniques as well. Rolling a grenade over the top of the roof to draw somebody out, and so it explodes. Yeah. Unlike a player character, they kind of pull it off, don't they? What I'd also
just say, like character fail the role, blow
yourself up. That's a bit like how it turned out.
I'm not having that.
That's how it turned out last night when I was playing GangBusters. But there you go. And talking of GangBusters, I want you to know, Judge Blythy, that Andy Garcia takes a shot to the shoulder and is able to continue fighting. So, therefore, GangBusters is a perfect reflection of this genre.
Exactly what you're saying, is it?
Yeah.
Or you could use a different game and just roll low, lucky roll low. You're all right.
So after this scene, Capone starts to strike back, and as we've mentioned, he sends out his assassin Nitti, who will come to focus later, but it starts putting pressure on the Untouchables. We have this great scene, this centerpiece scene. Malone himself is targeted. The way that it's set up, this is a point of view shot through the window. You are the assassin.
That's a great scene. And before that as well, another great scene you've got is Capone with the baseball bat.
Yeah.
So I remember when I watched that was quite a shocking scene that got talked about a lot, where he's wandering around the dinner table and one of the gangsters who's kind of failed him a little bit. I think he's one of the raids. He's in charge of one of the distilleries, one of the breweries, isn't he? In one of the raids, and he fails Capone and he hits him with a baseball bat, doesn't he? And I remember that being that kind of made everyone in the cinema sort of sit up and go, "Oh, blimey!" Look at that. But
that is.
But yeah, the other great bit is the bit we're talking about now.
Yeah, and I guess that's this is why I say that it's perfect for RPGs, because it is over the top. It's completely operatic, isn't it, in its approach? It's not naturalistic whatsoever. And as you say, that moment with the baseball bat and the overhead dolly shots that he keeps doing as well. So it's classic De Palma, really over the top, loads of blood and gore. And this scene with Malone is a De Palma moment. It kind of goes on for longer than you think, doesn't it? This kind of prowling. And as an audience, you don't want to see Malone get killed, do you? Because he's the good one. He's the one we relate to. Because
he's a good guy,
and Sean Connery just brings something to the film, doesn't he?
Yeah.
As soon as he appears on the screen, he's the one that you kind of think, it lifts it, elevates it.
Yeah, you don't want Sean Connery to be killed, but at the same time, I suppose it's difficult when you watch it a few times. But I think the first time you watch it, you almost know that he is going to be killed. I think there is a sense of foreboding that he is doomed, I think, which makes it all this more painful to watch, really, isn't it? Doesn't it? I think somehow it's more painful because you do know they've got it in for him, and of course they kind of trick you, don't they, with the killing, that the guy who you think's been sent to kill him isn't.
He's brought a knife to a gunfight. Right, he brought a knife to a gunfight, exactly. And so he's chased out by Malone. But it was always an ambush, and waiting in his white suit, knitted with his Tommy gun, and probably as many squibs as Sonny Corleone gets shot. He gets hit, doesn't he, by this Tommy gun?
and unlike Gangbusters, where Tommy guns are completely devastating, he's still alive when Kevin turns up, isn't he? Barely, admittedly, barely.
Luck roll puts him a hit point.
Luck rolls.
He gets a luck roll and he gets a hit point back, so he can crawl along the floor painfully. This fuels Ness to move things up a gear, and again, I keep making this point, but it's like big, bold things that stir the characters in this, and it's because it no subtlety in it whatsoever, is it? It
kind of just moves. It moves from one very dramatic scene to another, doesn't it? It has kind of energy of its own, doesn't it? Where it's just the next scene is going to be interesting. The next scene's going to be interesting. It's going to move you through. He's a great DM, Brian DM De Palma. He's just got action-packed scenes, hasn't he? No throwaway waffle.
And so this scene, Chicago train station, they need to intercept the bookkeeper who has all the evidence, the lectures, as he's been sent to a place of safety by Capone because he knows that the DA won't take the case to court unless they've got this evidence. And so they are determined at the train station, it's set up that Ness is doing perception checks at the top of the stairs. Andy Garcia is lingering around near the platform. We have this, frankly, quite painful scene where a woman is struggling with her bags and a pram.
Yeah. It's a funny scene, isn't it? Because it's almost out of kilter with the rest of the film, really, isn't it? That scene. There's an oddness to it, really, where I think he's trying to generate a sense of anxiety or paranoia, isn't it, with the pram? And you're thinking, what's that got to do with it? But and
you're also thinking, for God's sake, come on, get off this bloody stairs.
Get on with it. Shoot somebody.
or if you were that woman, you'd be thinking, oh, come on, you're dying to help her out. And that is the sense that Elliot Ness has, isn't it? I've got to, I can't cope with this woman going up one step at a time.
Can't go with this woman struggling. I have to go and help her, but if I go and help her, someone's going to shoot me, and her maybe.
So we have this child who looks like a cherub, looking at Elliot Ness as he's helping him up the step. And of course, this is a homage to Battleship Potemkin and the Odessa step. The bookkeeper appears and all hell breaks loose in terms of fighting. And this is a perfect RPG setup, this, I think. But I think it's like GURPS. It's like 1 second at a time. The pram and the first second goes on to the next step. Bounce. Shoot. Wait.
Yeah, bounce. Wait a second, bounce another step, shoot again. There you go. You see, like you said, tedious. Good.
But very somehow this it should work, but it sort of doesn't, does it? It's a famous scene, but it takes a bit too long to do it. It's almost
it's a bit
too far.
It's a bit of a peculiar scene. Like I said, it does feels slightly out of kilter with the rest of the film to some extent, as if he's trying to generate a sense of anxiety, but I'm not sure it entirely works.
I mean, this is a homage to the TV series, the ABC TV series that De Palma would have enjoyed in his youth. And like a lot of his contemporaries, George Lucas and Coppola, they were always hankering over the 50s. And in the 80s, the films were always like homages to film. The film's about films. And I do think that some of the great gangster films that people like, with all these cliches, the cliches that we as game players, we rely on. As I say, playing the GangBusters game last night, I didn't really need to do, the game didn't need to do a lot of work. I didn't need to do a lot of work because everybody knew what the cliches and tropes were, because like De Palma, everybody's soaked in it, aren't they? You get put a femme fatale in a scene, everybody knows how to behave, everybody knows what to expect. And this, as we've said, this is a very quotable film. The quotes come out, don't they, around the table, because of the cliches, because of the tropes. Really, the rules that you need for GangBusters are kind of secondary to all that. All you need really is to make sure everybody watches this film the night before.
Just watch the Untouchables the night before and you're ready to go.
Of course, to end the scene, we have to rely on Andy Garcia's sharpshooting, and that's never in any doubt. Never in any doubt he's going to hit.
Although some of the guys hanging around, like I said earlier, they just shoot them right from the word go because they look like gangsters, don't they?
The final scene we should look at is the courtroom scene, where the ultimate, and Bill Drago's face is fantastic for a gangster. He is almost been like an NPC that's been in every scene so far, because as Capone's assassin, he's always there, isn't he? Towards the middle of the film, when he does the hit on Malone, he starts wearing a white suit just so that you can pick him out.
Yeah,
he's the really bad guy. Ultimately, he's the one who's done all the damage. Yeah,
he's done all the killing. But the courtroom scene's great, isn't it, when Capone gets convicted? Clean-cut storytelling, really, isn't it? There's no ambiguity to it at all.
And it's done really well because you don't have to have a long courtroom scene. All that he does is change the jury. So he's no longer got the jury that he's nobbled and coerced into assisting. The judge decides to change the jury. And as you say, it goes out of the courtroom and we have the rooftop scene where he's confronted with Nettie, the assassin.
But of course, the ambiguous thing is that in the end, Elliot Ness, lawful good policeman paladin, ends up throwing him off the roof. But then you want him to do that. You do want him to do. You do as an audience. I think you want him to throw him off the roof. I think when he kind of arrests him, you're thinking like, oh no, that won't do.
Slightly disappointed when he lifts him back onto the roof, because it does.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You're kind of expecting that he's going to fall, and then of course he lifts him back and arrests him. You think, oh, slightly disappointed now. But of course he doesn't disappoint. Kevin doesn't disappoint, and he does end up throwing him off the roof. I've
really enjoyed watching it again. And as I say, I think it has fueled my interest in GangBusters. Really recommend revisiting it if it's a while since you've seen it.
Yeah. It did surprise me how much I enjoyed it, I think. But maybe I enjoyed it with an RPG eye. Maybe that's why. But I think the way to approach it is not to really put it in the bracket with other gangster films. Don't compare it to those famous gangster films like The Godfather and what have you. Don't compare it to them, because it's got gangsters in it and it is about gangsters, but it's not those kind of films, is it? It's a different type of film completely.
And it's precisely the space in which you can comfortably play a role-playing game because of that kind of larger than life.
It's surprising. It's surprising as well, I think, how there's not been more films like that made. Most gangster films are in the other category, but
there has been a couple. In the early 90s, there was a Christian Slater vehicle with called Mobster. With who else did it have in? Patrick Dempsey. Similar to Miller's Crossing, similar to Tarantino's films and all those films that exploded in the 90s. Films about films. It's not really about authentic crime. It's about...
No, it's not trying to replicate the actual real world of gangsters. It's trying to replicate the cinematic world of gangsters.
Yeah.
Or the TV world of gangsters.
Thanks, Blythy. I'll just get my coat and we'll come back for a few minutes. All right.
Are you looking for a D&D podcast with a dark side? Something more like Game of Thrones and less like Monty Python? Tale of the Manticore is part dark fantasy audio drama, part solo D&D RPG. There's no plot armor here. The dice make all the important decisions. Join me as I resurrect the excitement, wonder, and emotion of old school D&D. Made for a mature audience, Tale of the Manticore is both a fiction and a game. It's the story where chaos rolls.
I'll get me coat. Putting our coats on, heading towards the door, but we're still continuing to talk to each other. It's a storm out there. Well, we feel freezing when we get out. So
these are the benefit.
It's that point in the podcast where we just have some closing remarks and things that have caught our attention.
Well, I've started with my friend and his son. His son's 15 and got into D&D, and now he's got into Cthulhu, and he's got Berlin, the Wicked City. So we had our first adventure in the Wicked City, which was a lot of fun. Actually.
It's like the Weimar Republic. It looks like
Well, he didn't run it. He didn't run one of the. I'm assuming there are 3 or 4 scenarios in there, but he didn't run one of the scenarios. He used the setting that's in the book to develop his own scenario, use some of the ideas in it to develop his own scenario. But that was quite good fun. It proved again the principle that once you introduce Nazis into a role-playing game, kill and hit Nazis as many times, it doesn't matter. No one cares. Nobody cares. The librarian was beaten to death with a cricket bat. But he was in the Gestapo, so it's okay. It's okay, isn't it? I don't think you should never beat a librarian to death with a cricket bat, or anybody, but not a librarian. But if they're in the Gestapo, I think it's all right, isn't it?
It's all right. You've got license to do it. Nobody's judging.
License to do what you want. It's the Indiana Jones principle, isn't it? That you can kill as many Nazis as you want. No one cares. But it's quite good fun, and it has been an interesting journey to see him go from 5th edition D&D to making that switch to Cthulhu. And really, all he's interested in now is running Cthulhu stuff. He's not that interested in D&D anymore. He's interested in Cthulhu and finds Cthulhu kind of fascinating. It is interesting to see that, that development in someone so young getting into role playing and then making that switch and thinking, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why he finds that so fascinating. But then, of course, we did, didn't we?
And is it just taking things, having a bit more flexibility, taking things out of the dungeon and into something that is a bit more, you can explore stories a bit more,
I think it is. I think it's like we've said about Cthulhu previously, that it's kind of so flexible, isn't it? You can dial it up, you can dial the horror up, you can dial the horror down, you can set it in different historical settings, that kind of thing. And I think all that does appeal to him. But it appealed to us, didn't it? In the 80s, that's what appealed to us about Cthulhu. But it's interesting to witness it, again, repeating itself and thinking, oh, right, so you're become quite bored of magic users and paladins and orcs, and you're much more interested in Cthulhu and what opportunities that presents for role-playing. And I suppose it demonstrates why Cthulhu is such a popular and has such longevity, hasn't it, in role playing, been so popular that you can see in him. It demonstrates why it's so popular. What about you?
Said at the start of the year that we would only purchase a new game or a new Something new once a quarter. Well, 4 weeks in to the new year, I've got a job load of stuff for John Carter of Mars because it was a fire sale on the Modifius site. And like everybody else, it seems I succumbed.
Yeah,
and bought a lot
I
of
bought
stuff.
it too.
Oh,
Who didn't?
Yeah,
You know what? I bet you can't buy John Carter from Mars anymore. I bet they've sold out. It's now become a rare item. You can't get it. It's out of print. It's gone.
Yeah.
Everyone bought it.
It's odd, isn't it? Because
Rulebook and the Games Master screen. Always get the Games Master screen. Always get it. Did you get the Games Master screen?
I did get it.
Of course you did. Because that's the golden rule. Always get the Games Master screen.
As Dave said in the Frankenstein's RPG special that we did from Grogmeet, the Modifius Games Master screens are good as well because they give you tools for a Games Master to generate ideas and stories, and they are quite sophisticated and good. I just find it amazing that this game that had a lot of exposure when it came out in 2019, I think it was. I think we saw it at UK Games Expo. And I was picking it up and looking at it. It was like demo games taking place there. Has been given a new lease of life by being injected into the community. Due to a sale.
Made it kind of, to use a gangster phrase, an offer you can't refuse.
Exactly.
You know, so cheap. It was so cheap. I think I got the rulebook and the Games Master screen for, it gave me something like 13 quid, 14 quid or something.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, I quite like the John Carter film. Got a bit of panning, didn't it? But I think I kind of enjoyed it, actually. That was okay.
And I read John Carter a long time ago because of the Moorcock connection, because he wrote a couple of John Carter novellas. And I liked it because it is a good setting for adventure. And it's the 2D20 system, which we enjoyed with Conan. So it'd be interesting to go back to it and see whether it works. A bit of a lighter version of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I found that quite appealing, that it is a sort of slightly lighter version. I think my mistake was thinking that all the 2D20 games are the same. So you think to yourself, all right, they're all the same. They're all the same rules. But I suppose it's like Free League, isn't it? They're not really. There's different complexities, either cranked up or cranked down a bit. And the John Carter games are a little bit simpler, isn't it? A bit more straightforward than some of the other 2D20 games. So we'll have to put that on the list of things we're going to play. So
the question is, Judge Blythy, in your capacity as judge, does it count? Because it was so cheap. Does it count as a purchase in this quarter?
No, it doesn't count. Doesn't count.
This is how you get.
I think if a game less than 50% of the retail price, it doesn't count, because it's such a good bargain that you can't be accused or blamed for buying it. That is my ruling. One full price game per quarter. That's my ruling on the matter. Do you agree?
Of course I agree.
Seems reasonable, doesn't it?
Of course I agree. And if we've learned nothing from studying GangBusters, Nobble the Judge is the first step.
Nobble the Judge with a free Games Master screen. Send him a free Games Master screen. More than happy. I'll tell you whatever you want.
Cheers, Blythy.
Cheers, bye.
Bye.
Come on, you slag. Wake up. Come on, wake up.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And thanks especially to the patrons for their kickbacks that keep this thing of ours going. I still haven't quite got Gangsters out of my system, so there's going to be something a little extra on its way soon. Leaving it behind is the hardest part. There's no action. I have to wait around like everyone else. I can't get decent snacks. I order some hobnobs with chocolate covering, and I got an oldie substitute. Like an average nobody, I get to live my life as a schnook. Adios, amigos.